Hello, welcome back to my channel and to today's video where it's that time of year again, my favourite season, so I'm going to be sharing this year's autumn home refresh. Now usually I do a few small seasonal changes in our bedroom, but this year I'm not going to be doing that because we are planning a little makeover of this room and I really want to get that done before Christmas. So to be honest, it just seems a bit pointless to go and change over cushions and bedding, etc. when the whole room will be getting a bit of a revamp. Right, so first things first, a cosy jumper is always required to get me in the mood for an autumnal refresh, and I've been starting my weekdays by using my FAQ 202 by FOREO. Now, I've spoken about this LED face mask before, so it isn't new, but it's still very much a part of my weekly skincare routine. And now that I'm officially in the 40 club, sticking to my skincare regimen is something that I do prioritise. So before use and after giving my face a wash, I give my FAQ 202 a clean, just using one of my washable cleansing pads and this silicone cleaning spray, wiping all over the inside surface of the mask and around the cutout areas, just in all the little nooks and crannies to remove as much bacteria as possible. And that is the beauty of silicone. It's really easy to clean. Now another benefit is that it moulds to any face shape because silicone is incredibly flexible and therefore you get even light coverage when you start your treatment. Now I personally prefer to control my FAQ 202 using the app which connects to the mask using Bluetooth, although you don't have to use the app at all if you don't want to. You can easily cycle through the different LED light wavelengths or the different colours by just using the button on the front of the mask. There are a few preset treatments on the app, but I personally prefer to tailor my own treatments depending on my skin and what it's doing on that day and what it needs. For example, there are certain times of the month where my skin feels a little oilier than usual and I can get the odd hormonal blemish, so I focus more on the LED wavelengths that reduce oil and help to heal blemishes, and I always have the near infrared option on to tackle the signs of ageing. Now I'm often asked if I've noticed a difference using the FAQ 202 and my answer is yes. My pores are more minimised, I've noticed huge improvements in the time that my skin takes to heal, like with a blemish for example, and I do have some sunspots and those are becoming less and less visible with continued use of the FAQ 202. So to put it simply, I wouldn't have stuck to using this for the last 7 months if I didn't see any benefits. Now, if this is something that you're interested in trying out, or maybe you've had your eye on it for some time, then I do have a discount code for 30% off, which you can use on the FAQ 202 and some other FOREO bestsellers. The code is also valid for use on already discounted items, so that will be an extra 30% off, and you can find the link and the code all down below in the description box. Okay, so whilst my FAQ 202 was working its magic, I got cracking with this year's autumn home refresh and task number 1, which is to remove all the covers from our sofa and give them all a wash. As I've mentioned before, this is a huge benefit of an Ikea sofa if, like us, you have some furry companions, and I suppose the same could be said of having children. Sometimes things just get a bit messy, and Ikea sofas have fully removable covers, and not just the seat cushions and the back cushions, but the armrests and the entire body of the sofa. So I usually wash the whole sofa, or its covers anyway, about twice a year. Sometimes we have to pop a single cover in the wash if there's been a little accident, and that's usually me spilling a cup of tea. But when I do the whole thing, it's a good excuse to clean inside the framework and fully under the sofa, which when you do have pets, that molt, it's crazy how much hair drifts under there. Now we hoover under the sofa once a week as part of our usual routine, but there's always hair that escapes us. So this just feels like a proper clean reset. The reason I tend to do this task first is because there's quite a lot of washing to do here. It takes about 3 loads to get all of the covers washed, and I aim to do all of those in one day, and then I keep an eye on the weather and try and do it when we've at least got some sunny spells or fully sunny days in a row so that the natural drying time is sped up. So our covers are actually from Bems. They're not the Ikea covers that came with the sofa, and they're made from linen. So they really should not go in the tumble dryer, or we'd probably never get them back on the sofa. So air drying is the only option. So whilst that first load was in the washing machine, I headed upstairs to do some small changes in a couple of the rooms up there. First of all, the bathroom. We don't really have much decor in there, but I do have a vase in which I usually change up the contents for each season. Now, I am a fan of low maintenance artificial flowers and stems, and given that this isn't our most used bathroom, I'd probably forget to change the water of any real flowers or water any real plants in there. So this works perfectly for me. It's just a very small change, but not everything has to be drastic, and it does give a nod to the current season. Over in one of the guest bedrooms, I did the same thing. I have vases in a lot of the spaces in our home, and I've collected quite the assortment of both artificial and also preserved and dried stems of flowers and greenery. So I've got a lot to choose from. Now, I usually tie the colours in with any prints that I have, so before refilling this vase, I wanted to refresh my memory with the autumn prints that I have for this frame. I've shared this tip before, but like swapping out stems, changing prints is such a simple and easy and cost-effective way to seasonally update a room. So I keep all of my prints inside the frame so that when I come to do a seasonal refresh, I've got them all there, crease-free and ready to switch over. I buy my prints as digital downloads, and then I just get them printed to the size that I want for the various different frames around the house. And I'll leave all of the info about where I get my digital prints and the printing company that I use down below in the description box. Once I'd got my autumnal landscape print as a point of colour reference, I refilled the vase with my chosen arrangement and then swapped over this cushion for one that was also more fitting with the autumnal colour palette. Outside at our front door, we unfortunately lost another box tree to box tree moths and their caterpillars. This is not the first time this has happened, and it had entirely killed off one tree and half of the other. So I have finally admitted defeat, and I decided to remove the box trees, and rather than replace them, I thought I'd try something else. But before I got to that, I had to complete my usual process, my routine of removing the outdoor rug and the doormat so that I could give the area a sweep, with some curious onlookers. This summer, Simon and I did start getting quotes for the driveway, which stretches down to this little area by our front door. And that would mean no more grey bricks that I have to cover with an outdoor rug. So that's given us some food for thought, and whilst we're still undecided on what we're going to opt for, it will be a project that we aim to get completed in the next year, so we'll keep you updated on that. I also had to say goodbye to our dried autumn wreath this year. I had hoped to get another year out of it, but it had started to fall apart and look a little bit tatty and worse for wear. So I decided to replace it, and because I love the Christmas wreath that I bought last year so much, I had a look at some autumnal options from the same company, and I found this one, which I instantly fell in love with. It is called an autumn and Christmas wreath, and given that it also has lights, I think it would definitely be appropriate for both or either of those times of year. Now, I'm all in favour of artificial stems and plants indoors, but I've always been against having them outside. I just prefer the real thing and thought that at least if I forget to look after them, nature can take over to a degree. However, nothing has survived in this area for the last 4 years, so I reluctantly bought a couple of artificial trees as my last resort. So in this little area, I started with some wicker baskets and then I popped the new trees inside. The trees do have a weighted base. It sort of looks like a plant pot. So they felt pretty sturdy in there and I didn't feel any need to pad them out or weigh them down anymore. And then I needed to add a little bit of autumn. So this year I decided to keep it pretty simple and just use the woven pumpkins that I bought a couple of years ago. I've got 2 large and 3 smaller ones, so I balanced them out on either side of the door, and then I used the 3rd smaller one to cover this annoying vent in the wall. As part of our autumn-winter preparation, Simon booked in the chimney sweep to come and do whatever they do. I'm clearly not a part of that process. And he also arranged our delivery of logs, which was due to arrive on this day. And that would see us through the next 6 months or so. We had some logs left over from last year, so I loaded up the log basket before the new delivery arrived, took those inside, fully inspected for spiders, FYI, and then topped up our log store, which is next to our fireplace. And then, just as I'd finished, our delivery turned up. We had a huge pile of lovely fresh logs to be stacked in the log store and 20 minutes in which to do that because rain was due. I took a few more loads inside to fill up the store next to the fireplace while Simon stacked the rest. Against the clock, unfortunately not quite escaping the rain. And of course, it's sod's law, this is when my first load of washing was also done. So I took that out, loaded the machine back up with the next load of covers, and then had to leave the wet covers to air dry inside on some airers. Fortunately though, the sun did come out later on, which helped with the drying time. I tend to spread these home refresh tasks over a couple of days, so moving on to day 2 now, and because I'd done the outside entrance the day previous, I wanted to start with the inside entrance and our console table. First, removing all of the pieces that I was going to switch out, and then I gave the top a hoover with a little brush attachment. I think it's actually a car attachment, but in my head, it's great for getting the dust out of all the little crevices in the rustic texture of this table. I usually have an idea in my head of what I want to go for, but I'll often experiment along the way and change little different bits and pieces as I go until I find a combination that I like. I've used these preserved beech branches in different areas of the house for I think the last 3 years now. They're a bit crumpled from being in storage, but I reckon they've got another couple of autumn seasons left in them. And they're such a beautiful, rich autumnal colour that this year I wanted to use them on this console table so that it was a welcome for us when we came in. The vase and its contents are usually the element that I decide on first, before then starting to fill in the rest, and I always like to include some natural textures with baskets, wooden elements, pine cones, etc. And by no means am I a professional, that's very evident, but I don't think you have to be to decide what you like the look of and what you want to see in your own home, day in, day out. Next up was the lounge, which admittedly we don't use as much as our living area off the kitchen, and that's because that is where the TV is. However, when the fire's going in here, it's so cosy, and we do have a cupboard full of games that we'll bring in here to pass the winter evenings. So this year I decided not to change too much. I just swapped out a couple of the cushions for something a little bit darker, and the same with this throw blanket. And I think it was the last seasonal refresh that I filmed, which was probably spring this year, where I changed these shelves around. And to be honest, I've settled on them and I really like them as they are. I usually remove everything and start afresh, but I just kind of like the simplicity of them. So I'm adding just a little hint of autumn with these carved wooden pumpkins and then a print change in this small frame. On the coffee table, I switched out the vase and filled it with these brown gypsophilia stems. The colours are what I love most about autumn. Obviously, I'm a neutral lover, but with autumn, I get to embrace all of the rich, earthy tones that come with this change of season. So, after 3 loads of washing and a day of air drying, the covers were dry and ready to be ironed so that they could go back on the sofa. Now, I love housework. I love cleaning. I love doing the washing, the hoovering, scrubbing, anything. But I hate ironing. So this is very much a task that I loathe and do not look forward to in any way. Even a podcast doesn't make this an enjoyable task. But it has to be done. And once it is, the covers are ready to be pulled and stretched back onto the framework of the sofa and all of the seat and back cushions. This is quite a strenuous task, so whilst I always rave about how ideal Ikea sofas and their fully removable and washable covers are, this can be a two-person job. Our covers in particular, as I mentioned, they're from Beech and they're made of linen, so they do shrink slightly after being washed. And whilst they do stretch back out with use as we're sitting on the sofa, it's a bit like a gym workout trying to get them back on. But once it's done, it's really nice to have a fresh feeling, looking and smelling sofa. I moved the side tables back into place and then did a little re-merch of the coffee table, as well as changing over the cushion covers and the artwork. Now onto the kitchen. As you'll see, we do have some prints in here, so they needed to be switched out. And as with the first print change that I did upstairs, I have the same process for these. Keeping all of the seasonal print options inside each frame so that they're stored flat and crease free, and also for convenience, because swapping these over literally just takes a few minutes. I do also have some fun vintage style prints for Halloween, which I swap over for the last couple of weeks of October, before then switching back to these on November 1st, and then switching those out for winter prints on December the 1st, which no doubt I'll be covering again in a video where I share our Christmas home refresh. Then I moved on to the vases, of which we have one smaller one situated on our kitchen shelf. So I swapped out the cow parsley that had been residing in there for spring and summer for something more seasonally appropriate for autumn. And then I did the same for our larger vessel, which is on the island. And finally, it wouldn't be a seasonal switchover without swapping out the home fragrance. Autumn is my favourite season, and part of that is the scents that come with it. I'm a sucker for anything pumpkin, apple, cinnamon, spices, but also some of the not so sweet, dare I say, more mature scents too. Now I do like a cosy candle, especially when I'm sat in the lounge with the fire going, but I tend to stick to reed diffusers so that there's a fragrance in the air more continuously. And there we go, another autumn has rolled around and another home refresh has been completed. Do you change anything in your home for each season, or maybe just your favourite season? Let me know down in the comments. But for now, that's it from me. Thank you as always for watching. Happy cosy season, and I'll see you next time.